to the right people. Even if you're not a document controller, it's likely that you'll need to manage documentation on a project. Remember that poor information management is the biggest cause of project delays and cost overruns. Understanding good practice principles will help you and everyone else on the project team. It's all about getting the right information to the right people at the right time. Let's start by introducing some basic principles of good document control. In this video, we'll discuss minimum requirements. In other videos, we'll talk about why good classification is important and make some suggestions for how we can make use of files outside of Aconex. Now, joking aside, there are lots of standards around managing information and documents. All of them tend to suggest or recommend a few common elements. Most are common sense, but all too often project teams try and do things differently for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're new to using a platform like Aconex, or maybe they're trying to comply with guidelines that are out of date and don't really work with digital information. Whatever the reason, it's always best to keep things as simple as possible. It's better to have a simple setup that everyone uses than a complex one that few people use. So, what are the common minimum requirements that most standards recommend, and how does Aconex deal with them? First, there's a unique ID. In Aconex, this is the document number. It's the only field that must be unique. Remember that this should always match what's on the hard copy of the document. Then there's subject. Most standards specify this as a way of identifying the nature of the document. In Aconex, this is often the discipline, like mechanical, engineering or electrical. Next is type, and this is taken care of with the document type field, and it would tell us if the document was a drawing, a specification, a report, and so on. Then there's originator, and this is the author or document creator. In Aconex, we have the created by field, and that can be renamed if required. Finally, there's date, and this can be interpreted in many different ways. In fact, many projects use multiple dates to record key date-based information. For Aconex, this would typically be the revision or modified date and would indicate the date the document was last changed. In fact, the modified date in Aconex is another field that's always there and automatically updates every time the document is updated. In one of the lessons for the associate learning, we discuss what Aconex projects require as a minimum. If we add in the missing recommendations we see in most standards, we end up with this. If a project only used these fields to organize its documents, it would work. We could add more fields, but the more we add, the more likely that mistakes will be made. More fields often lead to frustration for people if there is a lot of information to complete for each document that is added to a project. The key to success is finding a balance between having just enough information for efficient classification and having too much. So why do we classify documents in the first place? What's the purpose of this additional information? Good classification is crucial to being able to find information. Imagine if we just had to search on file names. Classification provides a structured way to organize the documents on a project. Poor classification is the most common cause of problems on a project. When people say they cannot find things, it's usually because the information has been poorly classified. It's always best to keep the classification as simple as you can. The more people are required to do when uploading documents, the more resistance you'll see. And that may mean a few compromises, but think of the needs of the project team rather than a single organisation or person. That is, after all, what great collaboration is all about. Here are 3 key reasons why classification is important. Classification groups together common sets of data. For example, all the drawings, all the electrical information, all the documents from last month, etc. And this may not be obvious when you're uploading documents, But later on, when you need to find them or report on them, it will soon become clear if the documents have been tagged or classified properly. That then means this information is easier to retrieve. Nobody wants to spend all their time looking for information. Good classification makes finding documents easier. One aspect of classification that is often overlooked is that it can also be used to control access to a document. For example, marking it as confidential. Tagging a document as confidential will restrict who can see it and use it, and we cover that in another video. Again, remember that over-classifying can be detrimental. If in doubt, start off simple and add the complexity as the project progresses and the team become more proficient in their use of Aconex. The file names applied to documents outside of Aconex are related to classification. Not directly, but they can assist and make managing and retrieving documents easier and more efficient. Take a look at these examples. Have you seen file names like this? They may be obvious to the creator of the document, but to others, they could be confusing. Often we don't give much thought to naming our files. If we do, we might add some indicator for ourselves, like a meeting date or a brief description. And that's okay if you're the only person dealing with those documents, but what about others? When we download documents from a project at some point, we won't have all the tagged information or classification details to help us. We'll just have the file name. If that file name has no obvious meaning, we'll have to open it to find out what it is. For example, does anyone know what a 27B/6 form actually is? If you're responsible for managing large volumes of documents, that could be very time consuming. Therefore, it pays to use a more disciplined file naming convention. Here's an example. This file name includes the document number, its title, and its revision. This provides much more information when dealing with the document outside of Aconex. If we were to download multiple documents from a project, this convention would make it much easier to check that we had everything we need. Now, this is just one suggestion, but make sure you spend some time and think about file names and how they're understood by others. It doesn't take much effort to be disciplined, and you never know when it might come in useful. Upload profiles are often overlooked, but if you regularly upload lots of documents, profiles can save you a lot of time. We'll open the document register in Aconex and start the document upload process from the Documents menu. To access profiles we've already created, we select them from the list. And notice that we can view and edit these profiles as well. But let's start from the beginning. Imagine we have the task of uploading large sets of documents on a regular basis. We might be responsible for distributing the drawings from various disciplines to the project team. Or we might need to get all the design documentation uploaded. What profiles allow us to do is to determine and pre-fill the information for each document being uploaded to the project. And this can save us a lot of clicking and typing. Before we start, we must understand how important the default profile is. This is part of every project and has some very basic settings that apply to all documents being uploaded. On a new project, it's the only profile that's available. On more established projects, it may have been changed and renamed. If you alter the default profile, it will affect all documents that are uploaded. And that could result in time-consuming work correcting the various information and document fields. We recommend not changing the default profile or change it to the minimum amount of information you want to pre-fill for all documents being uploaded. Let's create a new profile, and this means that any default profile will remain unchanged. At first glance, there's a fair bit going on, so let's break things down step by step. we'll create a profile that can be used to upload all electrical drawings. So at the top, we'll add a name and a brief description, and this will save a new profile and not overwrite the default one. The Use Default box is checked, and that's what we need, and that will become obvious in a moment. Then we have the Extract Documents Values checkbox. When we check this, it will attempt to identify the document number from the file names of the documents being uploaded. In another video, we discussed the good practice of being disciplined and structured with your file names. This is the payoff. The different examples show you how different file names are converted to document numbers. Look at that first example. The file name is very simple and includes the revision in brackets. Aconex will take the first part and use that as the document number, and then use the value in the brackets and use that as the revision. And that's the benefit of using a structured file naming convention. The next section looks after the default values, and this is very simple to use. Just enter the values you wish to use for all documents uploaded using this profile. We're creating this profile for electrical drawings, so we'll select the relevant values. Note the mandatory fields are highlighted. Now, even though they are mandatory, they don't need to be completed for the profile, but they will when we finally register the documents after they've been uploaded. When we're done, we click Save. To edit an existing profile, select it from the list and click View Edit. It's worth spending a little time to learn how to use upload profiles, especially if you're responsible for uploading large volumes of documents on a regular basis. Placeholders are a great way to manage documents that haven't been created yet or that are not ready to be added to the project yet. Let's explain. In other videos, you've seen how we can upload or add documents to a project. When you do that, you add additional information for each document, like the document type, its discipline, revision, status, and so on. Adding placeholders is similar. You add the additional information for each document, but you don't actually add a file or document. So why would you want to do this? It's common for teams to plan ahead and decide on what documents are needed, especially with drawings. Consultants often decide how many drawings they plan to produce for a project. This allows them to better plan their workload and monitor progress. On some projects, teams might agree up front with each other what's needed, and these then become an official set of deliverables. Again, this helps with managing progress and understanding workload. Placeholders essentially allow us to pre-register documents that will be produced. We create the document information and then update it later with the actual document when that document is available. Let's take a look. We add placeholders here. We see two options. Let's look at the manual option first. We decide how many placeholders we want. Let's just add 5 for this example. For each placeholder, we have to complete the information, and this will depend on how the project is configured. We can add the information for each placeholder one by one, or select placeholders using the checkboxes and use the bulk edit option. This is quicker if the placeholders have the same information, like the discipline. Once all the required details have been entered, we register the placeholders, and that's it. In the document register, they appear like any other document, they just don't have an icon. Then, when the documents are ready, we just update the placeholders and add in the document. Just make sure you check placeholder details when adding the documents to them. Using this manual method is okay for a smaller number of placeholders, but if you need tens or hundreds of placeholders, that's where the Excel method comes in. This method requires work up front and so is better suited to large numbers of placeholders. First, you'll need to download the template. This template is specific to every project, so make sure you give it a name that matches the project. In the template, you'll see all the document fields in the first row. The ones in bold are mandatory fields and cannot be left empty. Then, each row represents a single placeholder. Because it's Excel, it's pretty easy to create lots of placeholders copying details to multiple cells. The only thing you need to know are the exact values for document fields, otherwise the template won't work. You can find this out by adding a single document to your project and looking at the available values for any field. For text fields, you can add any details you need to, but just be mindful of typos. Here's a completed template. A few things to note here. Depending on the project configuration, there may not be field values that make sense for placeholders. Here we have a value for status of not started. That's a great status for placeholders. For revision, we've added NA. Be sure to check with the project admin if there are any protocols that you should observe. For the title, we've just entered placeholder numbers. We can then amend the title when we add the actual document. We've then left the optional fields blank. Once we're happy with the information, we can upload it to our project. We use add placeholders, drag the template to upload it, and here we are. It's the same screen we saw earlier, but now it has all the details filled in, except for that one there. This is the great thing about this feature. It shows you where there are errors. This one is simple. We forgot to add a value for that last document in the Excel file. But we can correct that here. Now we're ready to register the placeholders. Select them and we're good to go. That's it. Placeholders allow you to plan ahead and be proactive with your and others' progress and workload. If you only have a few to register, use the manual option. But if you have lots, think about using the Excel option. When we use the file upload feature, the files are placed in the temporary files area of the document register. Let's take a closer look. You can access this area via the tab in the register or via the documents menu. And remember, this area also stores all the reports that are exported too. We can search for files in the same way as the document register, but it will only work if that information has been completed. For example, if you use an upload profile to pre-fill some of the fields. Let's locate some files we uploaded previously. Here they are. Now, because they haven't been registered yet, we can delete them if we need to. And this is the only time a file or document can be deleted from a project. One advantage of this is that if you are the document controller, you can get others to upload multiple documents here, and that can save you time. Then you can just make sure they are registered correctly. Let's look at how we do that. We select the files we want to register and click Move to Register. Now all we need to do is complete the relevant fields for each of the files. Notice how these have some of the details already completed because we used an upload profile for them. For these particular files, we have both the document number and title included. And this is not uncommon, and it means we can just cut and paste the title across like this. Another time saver. We look at more time-saving tips in another video, but for now we can just complete the mandatory fields. And we can also select and remove files if we want to at this point. But remember, once registered, a document cannot be deleted. When we're done, we click Register. The files are then moved to the document register. And then we can transmit those to other organisations if we need to. Being able to upload multiple files in one go is a big time saver. But have a think about how you can group together similar files and make the best use of the Upload Profiles feature. Let's take a very quick look at a simple feature that helps us see what's going on with documents in the document register. It's called Document Activity. Here we are in the document register. To see the activity, we click here. It displays an activity stream for the document register. It tells us what documents have been updated. And this can be really useful for seeing if a key document has recently been changed. Now keep in mind that on a busy project, this could contain a lot of information. If you click the arrow alongside a document, it will reveal more information. Here we can see that this includes links to download the document and view its properties. We can also see what actions have taken place. For example, we can see that this file was updated and had its review status changed. And this one, where a new file was added and the revision was changed. One important thing to remember is that it will only show activity within your organisation and not what other organisations have been doing. Document activity won't tell you everything, but it's a great and simple way to get a quick look at what's been happening recently. In another video, we look at how we can see basic document activity. For more detailed information about what's happened to a document, we can use the event log. Let's jump into Aconex and show you how. We use the context menu here to open the event log. This will show us everything that's happened to the document, but only from our organisation's perspective. It won't show us what other organisations have done with the document. We can see if a document has been viewed, downloaded, updated, etc. There are convenient links for opening things like related transmittals. Again, just remember this is only from your organisation's perspective. For documents that have a lot of actions and activities associated with them, we can use the boxes above the columns to filter the results, just like we do in the document and mail registers. The event log is the audit trail for a document, and it will tell you everything that's happened to it from your organisation's perspective. In this video, we'll look at the document history feature. And this essentially provides us with a complete record for all versions or revisions for a specific document. Let's take a look. Here we are in the document register with some documents. When we search for documents, the results always show the most current revision or version of those documents. There may be newer versions in existence, but the register will only display the most current ones for you and your organisation. Confused? Okay. Remember that if another organisation uploads a new version of a document, you won't be able to see it unless they transmit it to you. And that's important to understand. Sometimes a company may update their documents, but limit who they share them with. They might need to get them reviewed before issuing them, for example. But we can see older versions in our register as well. Let's find a document that has some history. First, we use this checkbox to show older versions of a document within the register. Then, we'll search for a specific document to demonstrate how the document history is shown. It will only be able to show the versions that are relevant for your organisation. The register only contains documents that your organisations have uploaded and those received via transmittal from other organisations. Here we can see the document shown in bold is the most current version, and you can also see the details for other versions are clearly shown. You'll see things like changes to the revision and date, for example. Just remember to uncheck the Show Document History option when you're done, otherwise it may be confusing to see so many documents with the same name. Being able to look at the document history can be very useful if you need to check that your organisation has all the necessary versions, especially if you're responsible for distributing documents to the project team. Let's finish this course with a recap of what we've covered and what's next. But first of all, congratulations. If you've finished all the lessons and topics in this course, fantastic job. Thanks for taking the time. Here's what we've covered.